The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Marcus Chen stripped off his $1,000 suit for the last time in what felt like forever. His hands, soft from years of boardroom handshakes and champagne toasts, trembled as he pulled on the navy blue janitor's uniform. Tomorrow, he would walk into Harrison Industries not as the CEO who had built it from nothing, but as Mikey, just another invisible worker pushing a mop cart through hallways where million-dollar deals were made. The decision hadn't been easy. 3 months ago, an investigative journalist had published a scathing article about corporate executives living in ivory towers, completely disconnected from their employees' struggles. Marcus had read every word, his coffee growing cold as the accusations hit uncomfortably close to home. When had he last spoken to anyone below the executive level? When had he last seen the people who kept his building running? His assistant thought he'd lost his mind. His board members were furious. But Marcus knew this was something he had to do. For 1 week, he would work as a janitor in his own company, experiencing firsthand what life was like for the people whose names he'd never bothered to learn. The first day was brutal. Marcus, now Mikey, arrived at 5 a.m., his body protesting every unfamiliar movement. The mop felt foreign in his hands. The chemical smell of cleaning supplies burned his nostrils, and his back ached from bending and lifting. By noon, he was exhausted in a way that boardroom meetings had never made him feel. He was struggling with an industrial vacuum cleaner on the 3rd floor when she appeared. "Hey there," a soft voice said behind him. Marcus turned to see a young woman, maybe 25. With kind brown eyes and clothes that had seen better days. She held a brown paper bag and a thermos. "You're new, aren't you?" "I'm Elena." "Mike," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Up close, he could see the worry lines around her eyes, the way her shoes were worn thin at the heels. "I brought you some lunch," Elena said, extending the bag toward him. "I know how it is being new. Sometimes you forget to pack anything, and the cafeteria food here is." She made a face that made Marcus almost smile despite his exhaustion. "Oh, I couldn't," Marcus began, but Elena was already pressing the bag into his hands. "It's just a sandwich and some soup. Nothing fancy." She paused, studying his confused expression. "Look, I know we don't know each other, but I've been working here for 3 years in accounting. I remember my first week here I was so nervous I forgot to eat for 2 days straight. Someone was kind to me then, and I've tried to pay it forward ever since." Before Marcus could protest further, Elena had disappeared around the corner, leaving him holding what might have been the first home-packed meal anyone had given him in decades. Inside the bag was a carefully wrapped peanut butter and jelly sandwich, cut diagonally, and a thermos of what turned out to be homemade vegetable soup. A small note was tucked beside the sandwich. "Hope your first day gets better, Elena." Marcus found himself in the supplely closet, eating Elena's lunch with tears he couldn't explain streaming down his face. The sandwich was simply store-brand bread, generic peanut butter, but it was made with a care he'd forgotten existed. When had anyone last thought about whether he'd eaten? When had anyone shown him kindness without wanting something in return? The second day, Elena appeared again, this time with leftover pasta and a shy smile. "How did yesterday go?" she asked, genuinely interested in his answer. Marcus found himself telling her about his sore back, his confusion with the cleaning equipment, the way some employees treated him like he was invisible. Elena listened with the kind of attention he usually only got from people trying to sell him something. "It gets easier," she assured him. "And hey, most people here are good. They're just busy, you know. Sometimes they forget that we're all just trying to make it through the day." By the 3rd day, Marcus was looking forward to Elena's visits. She brought him coffee and a muffin, sharing stories about her life here, how she was taking night classes to become a teacher, how she sent money home to help her sick mother, how she'd moved to the city with nothing but hope and determination. "Why are you so kind to me?" Marcus asked on Thursday as they sat on a bench outside the building. Elena had brought him a full meal: soup, sandwich, apple, and homemade cookies. Elena was quiet for a moment, looking out at the busy street. "My dad was a janitor," she said finally. 20 years at the same office building downtown. He used to come home and tell me about his day, how most people walked past him like he didn't exist, how he felt invisible even though he was the one who made sure their world stayed clean and functional. She turned to look at Marcus directly. "He died 2 years ago. Lung cancer." Even at the end, he kept talking about how he wished just one person at that building had seen him as human, had asked his name, had said thank you. Her voice grew soft. "I promised myself I'd never let anyone feel that invisible if I could help it." Marcus felt something break open in his chest. Here was this young woman, struggling to make ends meet, giving away her lunch every day to a stranger because she understood loneliness and invisibility in ways he was only beginning to grasp. Friday came too quickly. As Marcus cleaned the executive floor of his own office just yards away, he realized he didn't want this week to end. For the first time in years, he'd felt genuinely connected to another human being. Elena's daily kindness had become the highlight of his days, her stories and laughter more valuable than any business deal he'd ever closed. Elena appeared with lunch as usual, but this time she seemed nervous. "Mike, I have something to tell you," she began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with her words. "What is it?" Marcus asked, concerned. "I'm getting laid off," she said quietly. "They announced it yesterday. Budget cuts. 30 people from accounting, including me." She tried to smile, but Marcus could see the fear in her eyes. "I guess I won't be able to bring you lunch anymore after today." Marcus felt rage and heartbreak collide in his chest. Elena, kind, generous Elena who gave away her lunch to strangers and sent money to her sick mother, was being let go while executives like him made bonuses that could feed a family for years. "When?" he managed to ask. "End of next week." "I'm trying not to panic, but jobs are hard to find, and Mum's medical bills." Elena's voice trailed off. She straightened her shoulders with the kind of courage that made Marcus ashamed of every easy day he'd ever lived. "But that's not your problem. I just wanted to say it's been nice having someone to talk to during lunch." "You're a good listener, Mike." That evening, Marcus sat in his penthouse apartment, staring at the city lights below. 5 days as a janitor had taught him more about his company and himself than 20 years as CEO. He thought about Elena's father, invisible and unappreciated until the day he died. He thought about Elena herself, facing unemployment with grace and courage while still finding ways to care for others. He thought about the dozens of employees like her, are good people doing important work, struggling to make ends meet while he collected profits from their labor without ever seeing their faces or knowing their names. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear. Marcus walked into Harrison Industries in his CEO suit. But everything had changed. His first call was to HR. "I want a full review of the proposed layoffs," he told his startled director, "and I want to meet with every employee who's being let go, personally." His second call was to his assistant. "Cancel my meetings today. I'm going floor by floor to meet our staff, all of them, and I want you to arrange a company-wide meeting for Friday." When Elena received the call to come to the executive floor, she was terrified. She'd never been higher than the 5th floor, never seen the marble and mahogany world where company decisions were made. She knocked nervously on the CEO's office door, smoothing her best dress, the one she'd worn to her father's funeral. "Come in," said a voice that made her freeze. Elena stepped into the office and found herself staring at Mike the janitor, now wearing an expensive suit and sitting behind the biggest desk she'd ever seen. "Hello, Elena," Marcus said softly. watching the confusion and realization play across her face. You're Marcus Chen, she whispered. You're the CEO. Marcus nodded, suddenly more nervous than he'd been during any board presentation. I need to tell you something. This past week, working as Mike, was the most important week of my professional life. Your kindness, or your daily kindness to a stranger you thought was just a janitor, it changed everything for me. Elena's eyes filled with tears. You were testing us, seeing how we treat the help. No, Marcus said firmly, standing up and moving around the desk. I wasn't testing anyone. I was trying to understand my own company, my own employees. I was trying to remember what it means to be human. He paused. Elena, you showed kindness to someone you thought had nothing to offer you in return. That's the rarest thing in the world. Elena wiped her eyes, her voice shaking. I brought you lunch. You're a billionaire. And I brought you peanut butter sandwiches. Those sandwiches meant more to me than any business meal I've ever had, Marcus said honestly. They reminded me that success isn't measured in stock prices or profit margins. It's measured in how we treat each other, especially when we think no one important is watching. Elena was quiet for a long moment, trying to process everything. So I'm still fired? Marcus smiled, at the first genuine smile he'd felt in years. Elena, I'd like to offer you a position in our new community outreach department. It's a department we're creating specifically to ensure that Harrison Industries remembers what really matters to the people who make this company work and the communities we serve. What? The salary is 3 times what you were making in accounting. Full health benefits that will cover your mother's medical expenses. And your job will be to help me make sure we never forget the lessons of this week. Elena stared at him, speechless. There's one condition, Marcus added with a smile. I'd still like to have lunch with you sometimes. Not CEO and employee, just Mike and Elena. You can tell me about your teaching classes, and I'll try to remember what it feels like to be human. 6 months later, Harrison Industries had become known as one of the most employee-friendly companies in the country. Marcus had instituted profit-sharing programs, improved working conditions, and created advancement opportunities for custodial and support staff. But the change that meant the most to him was much smaller and more personal. Every Tuesday, Marcus Chen, a billionaire, still had lunch with Elena Martin as a director of community outreach. Sometimes she brought sandwiches from home. Sometimes they went to the company cafeteria and sat with other employees. But always, they remembered a week when kindness from a stranger had reminded them both what really mattered in life. The fluorescent light still hummed in the hallways of Harrison Industries, but now Marcus knew the names of the people working beneath them. He knew their struggles, their dreams, their stories. And every day, he worked a little harder to ensure that no one in his company ever felt invisible again. Because sometimes, the most important lessons come wrapped in brown paper bags, offered by people who understand that kindness is the only thing that truly matters in the end.